Most MMOs you play these days tell a story, that much we know, but few of them grow with you the way that Guild Wars 2 does. To me at least, this isn't just a world that stands still, it breathes, it evolves, and it definitely remembers. It's a story that has unfolded piece by piece for over a decade now, through expansions, living worlds, heartbreaks, and well, most importantly, triumphs. And for me, it's been one incredible journey, from my first steps as a brand new adventurer, brand new player in Tyria, to leading armies against elder dragons and even facing down a god. It's been one hell of a ride. In this video, I want to talk you guys through my time with the story that I've played through so far. So that will be from the base game, Living World Seasons 1, 2, and 3, Heart of Thorns, and then just recently finishing Path of Fire. I want to talk to you guys about the characters that really stayed with me, like Taimi, Ritlock, and most importantly, Aurene, and, you know, the ones that I don't really care for so much, and I'm looking at you, Bram, for that. But beyond that, I really want to talk about what Guild Wars 2 made me feel throughout the story beats that it presents. Now, I have to be transparent here. When I first jumped into Guild Wars 2, I really wasn't sold on the story at all. Sure enough, the world itself really blew me away. It was, of course, vibrant. It was really nice and dynamic, full of movement, life. There were events happening all around me, and it really made Tyria feel like a real place, and that was really cool. It's just, the story just didn't grip me straight away. It kind of felt a bit undercooked and a little bit rushed. Each race's personal storylines start fairly strong. You learn about the culture, your mentors, your early struggles. For example, the Char warbands, the Asura colleges, the Sylvari dream of the Pale Tree. It's full of potential, yet the pacing never really quite landed with me. It seems the storytelling back then, at least, kind of relied on these static side-by-side dialogue boxes. Characters were just kind of standing in an empty space, just talking at each other. It felt kind of dated, and even for back in 2012, even though I didn't play it back then, I can imagine it still seemed a little bit odd back then. Now, I've covered this topic briefly before on the channel, but I do have to say that when you get into the whole Zhaitan Risen storyline, I've got to be real with you guys, I just didn't enjoy it. The whole undead aesthetic really wore thin for me really fast. I got tired of just seeing a really grey colour palette, these slimy Risen enemies everywhere I went. The story did try to build tension through repetition, talking about the Risen and Zhaitan over and over again, but after a while I just kind of grew tired of it, and it was kind of rubbing me up the wrong way. By the time I'd reached the finale, I was ready for something new. I just wanted to move on. The assault on Ara, it looked really epic and was really cool. There were airships flying over, cannons blazing, but the actual storytelling didn't have the gut punch that I really wanted. Zhaitan himself doesn't even really feel like a personality. He's just this giant, faceless kind of squid dragon flying off in the distance. Still, with that being said, I'm really glad I stuck with it, because underneath that clunky delivery, you can really feel the seeds of something growing deeper and deeper. Now, Tyria definitely has a heart, and you'll find that when you meet characters like Logan Thackeray, Kaith, Air, Ritlock, each with their flaws, their regrets, and everything else in between. Destiny's Edge, which you get introduced to pretty quickly, isn't your perfect heroic guild. It's definitely fractured. It's a messy team of people trying to forgive themselves, trying to learn more about themselves every single day. And that humanity, that imperfection we just spoke about there, would become one of Guild Wars 2's strongest storytelling traits later on. Now, Living World Season 1, in my opinion, is where the world really started to flesh itself out a little bit more. This was kind of the turning point. This was where suddenly we weren't just following a static campaign, or at least that's how it seemed. We were part of a living narrative unfolding in real time. Some of the cities that I've come to know and love were changing. There were new villains that were being introduced, and the characters we met actually remembered what we had done. We weren't just strangers at this point. This is where we met the likes of Rox, Bram, Casimir, Marjorie, characters that would eventually become our new team, known as Dragon's Watch. Now, to play through this season, it was a little bit messy in some ways, as I believe back then it kind of played out as sort of temporary content that disappeared. But narratively, it was exciting. It was fun. You could feel the shift towards something bigger, most definitely. And of course, Scarlet Briar being introduced, the chaotic genius behind it all, is one of those villains that you either love or hate. And personally, I really found her quite cool. She's unpredictable. Her storyline's a little bit tragic, but very human beneath all of her madness. She wasn't evil for the sake of it, if that makes sense. She was curious, and that curiosity, unfortunately, cost her everything. And then, well, we've got to reference him. There was Bram. From his introduction, he has been one of those characters that just never clicked with me, to put it politely. He's brash, he's really self-righteous, constantly angry. Even before Air's death, I found him irritating, and later, unfortunately, that only got worse. It's so weird to me because in contrast to characters like Timey, who I absolutely love, when they burst onto the scene, it's like a breath of fresh air, whereas as soon as Bram is anywhere within a 5-foot radius of me, I just want to close the game down. Speaking of Timey though, what isn't there to love? I mean, she's this tiny Asura prodigy with so much potential. Her brain is huge, if I'm honest, but she's not arrogant with it. She's kind of adorable, she's funny, confident, and constantly pushing herself past her limits, often quite hard on herself, to be honest. It could just be me, but I find myself struggling to not fall in love with her character. Now, season 1's climax, that's when Scarlet attacks Lion's Arch, was kind of shocking, to be honest. It was definitely one of the most shocking events that you had seen at this point in the game. You're just watching the city burn, seeing players come together to fight back. It really felt personal, and that's what the game does really well. It really puts those personal hooks in. The destruction that was left behind was almost like a scar on Tyria, and it still feels real all of these hours later. On to season 2 then. Now this is where they pretty much took everything from season 1 but built upon it and gave it a real focus. The tone totally shifts, it becomes more serious, more cohesive, and the stakes just feel a lot more real. This is where we begin investigating Mordremoth, the jungle dragon, and that story weaves threads from the Sylvari, Destiny's Edge, and Scarlet's experiments into one kind of grand project. It's here, in this kind of season, that I feel Guild Wars 2 really finds its storytelling voice. The conversations instantly feel more natural, the characters have really clear motivations, and for the first time, you really sense the looming threat of the Elder Dragons as much more than just background noise. You're really kind of expecting something bad to happen here. This is also where new team dynamics shine. You've got the optimism of Casimir and Jory's growing relationship. Rox is trying to find her place in the world, and Timey is becoming the group's moral and intellectual compass, which I really, really adored. And she kind of breaks up the seriousness with this kind of like childish but kind of grown-up mentality. It's like she kind of knows when to rip sadness out of things but also inject the fun at the same time. And well, you know, Bram is still being Bram. I'm really sorry for any of you guys that love him. I just can't find a place for him. Either way though, towards the end of season 2, we definitely understand that something is coming. Something really bad is about to happen. It kind of leaves us standing on the brink of something massive. The jungle is stirring, Mordremoth awakens, and the world is about to change forever. It will never be the same. So off we go into Heart of Thorns, and I've just got to say right now, I loved Heart of Thorns. I loved every single moment of this expansion, from getting lost completely in anywhere that I went, to not understanding the verticality initially, to failing to even work out how to gain the updraft skill for my glider and falling and plummeting to my death too many times, to being eaten alive by pocket raptors. This expansion really was something special. In my personal opinion, this is where Guild Wars 2 stopped just becoming an MMO. It really does become an experience. The first time I entered Verdant Brink, I was stunned. Honestly, I was blown away. The verticality we spoke about briefly of the Maguma jungle was unlike anything I'd seen in a game world period outside of MMOs entirely. There is quite literally layers upon layers of verticality, of life in general, from the canopy treetops that are glowing with bioluminescent vines, all the way down to the dark, claustrophobic caves of the Tangled Depths, and the Tangled Depths is a different beast all on itself. The map design itself is chaos, but it's kind of controlled chaos. The developers have definitely done the best they could with the situation, and whilst you're fighting through that chaos, you're constantly disoriented, you're struggling to survive. It's not really meant to be a comfortable experience, and I feel like the map and the pathing of that expansion definitely aids that. Let's talk narratively though. Heart of Thorns definitely hits very, very hard. Air Stagolkin's death comes early and virtually out of nowhere. It's shocking, it's brutal and heartbreaking. As much as I only had a little bit of time with her, she definitely seemed like the calm wisdom of Destiny's Edge, the quiet strength holding up the group, if you will. Seeing her killed by Mordremoth's forces is one of the first moments that made me realize that this story definitely has moments where it's gonna gonna kind of set me back a little bit, you know. I didn't quite have the tear in my eye, but it was very much, you know, I could understand there's some depth to this. We can't speak about Air without referencing Brahm, and well, his reaction is understandable, I guess, to an extent. Grief often manifests as anger, but he just takes it out on everyone. That's my biggest issue. His bitterness drives a wedge through the group entirely. And whilst I can empathise with him to a certain extent, it is really hard to like him. I'm sorry for anyone that does, but his character just really is the polar opposite of me. It really is. He becomes a walking reminder of loss, but without the self-awareness to grow from it, if I'm being honest. He just kind of carries this weight with him throughout the whole experience, and every time he's on screen, it just drains me mentally. Traherne's death, though, near the end, is the second emotional gut punch. That was really quite sad to see anyone in that situation. He was one of the bros, you know, he was a really, really good ally since all the way back from when the pact initially formed, and his sacrifice to destroy Mordremoth feels both noble but really kind of heart-wrenching at the same time. Then we had the final battle, which was delving into Mordremoth's mind, I guess, the mindscape, and it was a really cool moment in Guild Wars 2. It's very haunting, it's quite surreal, it's definitely deeply psychological. There's a lot of stuff going on. You're kind of in and out of different dream and mind states. You're not just fighting a dragon here is the point. You're confronting guilt, memory, and madness itself. It kind of felt like more of a battle of yourself than anything else. What is absolutely shocking to me, though, and I wrote this down in my notes, is that after the battle is won, I didn't feel triumphant here. I didn't feel like we'd overcome something in a positive way. I just felt really hollow, and that goes the same for the environment around you. The jungle almost feels silent. Your friends, to an extent, are gone. The cost of victory feels like a lot here, and it definitely outweighs the positives. This is what made Heart of Thorns really groundbreaking to me, not just its stunning vertical landscapes, but the way it wasn't afraid to make you feel alone, uncomfortable, and broken. So Season 3 then begins in the aftermath of all of that loss, and Tyria feels very broken, very weary. It's fractured, but it is healing. We begin exploring strange new regions tied to the lingering magic of the dragons. This is kind of the next natural story progression. You're introduced to the shattered Bloodstone, the molten islands of Ember Bay, and the living volcano of Draconis Mons. I've probably absolutely slaughtered that. The story here, don't get me wrong, is slower. It has to be. You can't come off the back of Heart of Thorns and expect something to run at the same pacing, but here you're doing a lot more investigation. To me at least, it was a lot more about learning the consequences of what we've actually done. In Guild Wars 2, killing dragons isn't a victory, it's a disruption. As much as dragons are a problem, they're also a resolution. The issue we have now when killing dragons is we now have this magical flood to the world that threatens to destroy it. Now, as we've already mentioned, I was already really fond of Taimi, but this to me is where she really, really shines, and her character just comes out of the box. She truly is, to me, the genius that drives this story forward. She unravels mysteries about magic, dragons, and the delicate balance that holds Tyria together as a whole. She's not just that comic relief you're looking for anymore. She's, well, essential. Her scenes are full of warmth and curiosity, but also moments of real vulnerability. You can feel how much she cares about her friends and how scared she is of losing them. You can hear the trembling and nervousness in her voice. Season 3 also sets up the divine conflict that leads directly into Path of Fire, and well, we start to deal with big bad Balthazar. Balthazar's shadow looms larger with every single episode, and the tone definitely gets darker and darker once again. So now moving into Path of Fire, and well, if Heart of Thorns was claustrophobic and oppressive, Path of Fire is exactly the opposite. It's wide open, it's sunlit, and it's vast, and this is a breath of fresh air. I really enjoyed the start and pretty much actually the whole expansion, to be honest. The Crystal Desert is breathtaking, and when you learn about how it was created, it even adds a bit more depth to it that way. The way the light hits the dunes, the crumbling ruins of Varbi, the echoes of essentially a fallen empire, it all feels ancient and sacred, and whilst I'm not that into mythology, I personally was still able to enjoy it. However, beneath all of that beauty is, well, turmoil. The fallen god Balthazar has returned, and he's not the benevolent deity of legend anymore. He's this power-hungry, vengeful type now, and he's ready to essentially burn the world to ash in pursuit of dominion over magic. And if this wasn't enough, Palawa Joko, and this is going to be a huge thing now because everyone loves Joko. Joko's this self-proclaimed undead king of Elona. And essentially this is where he makes his grand return. Now Joko is one of those characters that's equal parts terrifying but also largely hilarious too. It really struck me that he is not only arrogant and dramatic and obsessed with his own legend, but he's also quite light-hearted at the same time. Every single time he appears, it's a mix of just menace and kind of like comedy, really. He'll enslave an entire civilization one moment and then launch into this ridiculous monologue about how he's the greatest being to ever exist. It kind of mixes the seriousness with the fun at the same time. At least to me, he seemed like the perfect counterpoint to Balthazar's intensity. I'm really glad he was part of this. He's definitely a villain that is quite clearly awful, but very entertaining at the same time. You almost look forward to his scenes just to see what kind of absurd nonsense he's going to come out with next. I really enjoyed this kind of transition between the living and the undead, kind of gods and mortals. I feel like that's what really makes Path of Fire's world feel layered and unpredictable. But in my opinion, at the heart of this expansion, it really felt like Aurene was there. From the moment she hatches, you just can't help but fall in love with her. She's this playful, innocent, kind of full of wonder little dragon that you immediately feel this bond to, not just as a commander, as a character, but also as a human being. You kind of just want to protect her, kind of like a parent in a weird way. As she grows, she starts to mirror the commander's emotional journey, you know, from fear to courage and everything in between, from innocence to responsibility. Every moment she's in danger feels personal. I found myself staring at the screen multiple times, my hands on my head, just hoping that nothing happens to her. You really just want her to be safe at all times. Now, when the story here of Path of Fire reaches its climax, the confrontation with Balthazar, if you like, it's breathtaking. Actually, it's quite cool fighting him and the war beast. The scale of everything, the music, it all comes together really nicely. And I love the fact they balance out anything you could gain with something potentially negative, because defeating a god isn't just about power here, it's also about sacrifice. It's about the destinies of the people around you and the balance of the world. And Aurene's role in that battle really cements her as the emotional heart of the entire saga, in my opinion. And speaking of Aurene, when we finish off Balthazar and Balthazar's actually dead, the godly essence that's trapped within Balthazar is released, or at least that's what I could kind of get a grasp of. This magic, the kind of raw power of a god, just surges uncontrollably. And just watching this energy so wildly transferred into such a small, innocent being like Aurene, and of course Kralkatorrik, who we've failed to mention at this point, was quite scary, really. You've got Kralkatorrik, who's this elder crystal dragon, and this young, pure, small kind of pup of a dragon, both at opposite ends of life. It just symbolizes a really cool moment of diversity in the story. It was a real showcase of good versus evil. Now, as of the recording of this video, I'm still yet to determine what happens to Aurene, but essentially Kralkatorrik at this point has taken flight and caused absolute chaos over the lands, crystallizing everything in its wake, and essentially that's where we are right now, unraveling that mystery, I guess tracking down Aurene to see what happened there. But yet again, it's definitely down to us to save Tyria. And I'm really excited to press into the story, because one thing Guild Wars 2 does really well is, at the epitome of peace, it's not afraid to tear that away and introduce the next catastrophe. By the end, you kind of realize just how far you've come, which is kind of crazy looking back on when I started the base game all of those hours ago, from just fighting zombies in a swamp to now standing against gods and shaping the fate of the world. In fact, if I was to sit here now and try and pick out key points of every expansion that I love, there are just so many to even list, and this video would go on indefinitely. I guess what I'm trying to say is, when looking back across Guild Wars 2's story, at least from my own perspective, it definitely had some shaky beginnings, but the soaring heights of Path of Fire and Heart of Thorns has really put into perspective just how incredible it is to see this game grow. I definitely started as a skeptic. The story definitely felt disjointed. The characters definitely felt a bit flat, but over time it matures. You mature with the story, you know, and the narratives blossom into something unforgettable. You definitely lose friends. That goes without saying. You definitely gain allies too, but more importantly, you carry the weight of the choices that echo across Tyria. Now, Taimi, Rytlock, and Aurene for me embody what I love most about Guild Wars 2. For me, those characters embody pureness. They embody heart and true grit and determination. I absolutely love Taimi's optimism and brilliance, keeping you just moving forward throughout the real hardness of the world. And on the flip side of that, Rytlock's gruff loyalty grounds the entire team, and Aureen reminds us that there is some purity in amongst the chaos. There is a hope, a light at the end of the tunnel, if you like. And of course, let's not forget Bram. Yeah, Bram's still annoying, but you know, even he represents something real, the raw, messy side of grief and, well, just being young and irritating. We've all been there once. By the time you finish Path of Fire, it's not just about dragons anymore. At least it wasn't to me. That's as far as I could see. It's about growth, real, genuine growth, most definitely loss, and connection to not just your character, not just your friends, but Tyria in general. And that's why, to summarize, Guild Wars 2 story has definitely stuck with me, and I'm really, really glad that I've taken the time to just play through it in chronological order and just really enjoy Tyria. If you're considering jumping into the game, if you're a story fiend, don't skip to certain points in the story. Just play it all the way through from your personal story. As I promise you, you won't just get rewarded in terms of items, but you'll get a real texture to the world. Things will matter because you've got the context behind them. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please do consider leaving a like rating, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you in the next one.